so I want to put watering on my Lake Drive lawn. Here it comes, I fill out my permit. We're gonna get a yes or no. We're gonna change your behavior at all? I mean, we're still gonna put in your.
Well, but it's gonna be
Which is
recorded.
actual
Privilege can be
But I'll get approval
removed.
for
And it
it.
can be removed. You
And
can
then
your
you'll
property
record
owner.
it.
And then it'll get ripped out later.
This is only public right of way,
So
that for
right.
the purposes of street trees, highway expansion, street expansion, grinding sidewalks, so it's not talking about personal property. This is just, if you put it in our property, and, I mean, public right of way is reserved for many reasons.
I get all
Why are you
that.
saying
I'm
yes?
just trying to
Okay, yeah, no, I like
And
it.
so the cost of the
Value
city
of-
or the village might incur, like say somebody has a retaining wall right up to the sidewalk, and so it's gotta be taken out.
Or it's a
I
vision
mean,
issue,
can
or
the
safety
village
for
force
risky
the
getting caught.
homeowner to remove it rather than incur the cost
Or
of,
can we charge the homeowner?
or yeah, back charge the
But
homeowner?
that's very difficult, and why the board asked for recommendation is, because I've sat there. If it's already there, you know, and people just stop, people even knowingly don't apply for them anymore, because they get caught, there's nothing, I mean, who cares? But for the village, there are impacts, and it's really hard to say to one owner and not another, well, you've got to take down your retaining wall. I have no problem with retaining walls or any kind of plantings, these like smaller retaining planters. But when you get to a, you know, massive retaining wall that's holding up dirt and it's in public right of way, that's a big, you know, a big cost, a big stop for the program. So delineating it to me, and just my opinion, is, makes sense. Hearing the things, when we talk about planters and lilac trees, well, I don't know the village board would ever say to remove those. I mean, so they're not big deals, and so they're probably what you're classifying as minor, maybe we can hear more what that is, but, so instead of focusing on that, I focus on like 6-foot walls, you know, like Ruckus and as a property owner that didn't realize the property line, and now we have 3.5 feet over, you know, the property, and I don't know why that right of way's there, but if we didn't need it, we would vacate, I mean, we more than likely might vacate it for them and sell. But if we need it for a purpose, and that's what public right of way is, then it's reserved for public use, and special privileges, we could just rip it out. So I just feel like recording those things, or at least having a process for the bigger, solid things, makes sense. Otherwise, you've got the village board wasting 7 people's time, and attorney time, and the village manager's time. I mean, there's costs associated to doing it backwards. GIS time, I mean, it would be nice to have a process that incentivized property owners to get a survey if they're doing a major project that might require use of public property. Bart?
And I think part of the reason that this came out more so this year too is, once again, because people didn't realize it was there. If you get the permit in the application, you acknowledge like the 6 stipulations that say, I understand that we could remove this for these reasons, I understand that it can't be this, that, and the other. And so if it's in the file, it's a lot easier for staff to say, and whether or not it's you or the next owner, hey, you acknowledge that you put it there, we preferred it not to be there, but it's there, that's the case. We can take it away, and it's just, it eases the conversation
And the vote.
as opposed to
Let's make sure.
us taking out, and then homeowners going, what are you doing? You're gonna replace that, and we're saying, no, and we get to the whole, you didn't have a permit for it in the first place, and it was a long conversation this summer. I don't think this is gonna solve it by any means. The discussion was more so having the approval on file so that so the homeowner acknowledged the right to be there could be removed.
From staff's perspective, thank you. Commissioner Dan?
I know we've already asked this, but let's play it out again on this being an issue, like to Crystal's example of the tree, the oak tree. Okay, so nowhere out by those oak trees by the road is that anyone's property. That's the village's property. It's not even about a line. You know, that's all village property.
There's a line. It's the exact line we're talking about. It's public right of way.
No, but that,
Behind the sidewalk.
right, but I'm saying the sidewalk, from the sidewalk to the
Oh.
street is always village property. So if somebody has a sprinkler over there, and we send out a notice and they have to get a permit. So they get a permit, and we have to take out the oak tree at some point. We're gonna go take out the oak tree, and if it's a new owner at that point, they're gonna get ticked off that their sprinkler got popped, and we're gonna explain it to them anyway. I just think you can give them notice and let everybody know that, hey, by the way, that between the sidewalk and the street is not your property. So that is village property, and I know that's become controversial. And then if you look at, I'm looking on GIS, I mean, are the issues I understand the oak tree issue, but are the issues on the other side of the sidewalk where people think it is their property all the way to the
Yes.
sidewalk?
Yeah.
Is it things that are all the way up against the sidewalk?
And
Or
there's
things that are 3 feet away from the sidewalk in some areas that it should be actually 2.5, or 3.5 feet is the line. It's usually things up to the sidewalk, right?
It's mostly things up the sidewalk, because that's when it's obvious
Right.
for us to quote unquote catch it or to get a complaint on it.
Right, so maybe it's.
But it has been on
But
as well.
if you're doing sidewalk work, there's a reason there's a 3-foot setback or whatever the setback is, because you're gonna disturb that. And if they have their sprinkler system in those 3 feet and we ruin it, they think that's their I understand, but I get what you're saying.
Absolutely, so, but I'm saying, like, are we solving a problem, or is it just better to make people aware that, by the way, this is all village property here? And get the ones that are, again, someone who puts a retaining wall, right, and I can think of a few of them that are right up against the sidewalk. I mean, those are easy to even drive around and see. I mean, do we then check on the 50 of those that are in the village and just,
I will say my department has zero capacity to go around and check and for those things.
Eric and I are gonna do it.
No, I think, and that's great, complaint base is good. I think the major push here is for costs and labor for public property that's gonna utilize public right-of-way when it's time, it would be nice for 2 things, to have acknowledgement from the owner that they know that's public property. And then the second thing is, so we know what's there ahead of time. We can look down on our GIS and actually see, or, look at our special permit and see what's in that besides just visually doing it. Because, I mean, the lines are hard. It's 2 feet, 3 feet. That would be my assumptions. And then, and for the bigger projects, it would be nice to have it recorded on a property, a deed, or on something so that people know there is a special privilege for that and we don't waste our time trying to do all that research. So those, I mean, if you buy a commercial property and you're, let's keep picking on the poor Ruckus property, that's the most recent that I know, but you buy it and you don't, it should be recorded that there's a special privilege that allows you to be in that 3.5 feet, you would never know that. We just,
I just don't understand why you wouldn't get a survey if you bought commercial property.
I don't know.
I mean, if you can afford to purchase commercial property,
If you
I
have
suspect
one.
you can afford $100.
Well,
Because
so
usually
that,
you need to know where, if there's easements or any of those types of things there.
I have,
I agree.
those sort of things.
Yeah.
I mean, you should,
It was a mistake, I truly believe that, I don't know.
But I guess another question was, so going back to like the sidewalk issue, is before sidewalks are replaced, isn't there a notice letter that goes out to the
I think
homeowners
so.
Yep.
that are in that area? I mean, is there a way to add an informative letter, maybe a couple diagrams or something with that? Yeah, or just, to make sure that
That
they
would be a
know.
great idea for residential properties, especially for plantings, for next cycle.
Because that way it's pertinent too. I mean, it's not just sending it out and then 3 years later, your sidewalk gets replaced or you've already moved and the next person moved in. Then it kind of occurs at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. I don't know what was sent out this year, but I can ask DPW for a copy of that and make sure that we get that language in there, regardless of anything else that should be in there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't remember that being on the letter I got.
And maybe that's the amnesty period. 3
Do you
months
know when you got that letter? How many
before.
months
So
in advance?
from the time you get the letter until.
Oh, it's been a series. I'm in the part that got remarked. So we got a whole bunch of letters. The circles, then they went away, and then they turned different color.
Can you just state for us, what are some, when you separate them out like other communities, minor and major, what would you consider minor?
So like an awning or a sign projecting off of a building in the commercial district, that would have been minor in our instance as long as it allowed for the 8 feet of clearance that's required, because it can be easily removed. There's no foundation. So as opposed to like a retaining wall with a foundation or any sort of structure would have been major. They always said if we could take it out easily with a hammer or something, or take it out in an hour, that's minor. If it's going to require us to blockade the street off and get a backhoe in there, that's major. So it was based on how easy it was to remove when we needed to remove it.
What about for residential?
Same thing. Landscaping would be minor, easy to remove. A retaining wall, 6-foot retaining wall, that would be major, but you're not taking that out in a day without considerable work.
Could you bring us, maybe, and if the commissioners would like to do this, I know this isn't a one-time conversation, but at our next meeting, or just an example of the
Yeah.
communities code that talks about those distinctions.
Do you want to see examples, or you want me to put a draft together?
What would you prefer?
I mean,
Example's fine, I think,
yeah, I think it's
so you don't waste your time too much.
I guess in my opinion, a draft would move this conversation along quicker.
Oh, whatever you think.
Yeah.
And then you can review the draft and say, you've gone too far. I don't want to bring it back and then have to draft it after that. So if you're comfortable with me drafting something based on that,
If you could just, if we ask questions like which communities
Yes,
do
yep.
this. We're gonna attach them, that'd be great.
Could you also maybe put in information about what exactly needs permits? I mean, I'm thinking, okay, daisies, planting daisies probably doesn't. What, I mean, like a sprinkler system, yes, like,
Oh,
and
so
I
like
would think
what-
of like what I would personally think of what would need a permit and what doesn't need a permit in the first instance. So that it's very clear, because I think, I've seen conversations where people don't even realize that they need permits for certain things. Like I gotta replace a thermostat, I'm like, do I need a permit? It's broken, do I, and it's starting to get confusing about what needs permits and what doesn't need permits.
an easy answer to me at this point would be anything other than turf in that area would need a permit.
Okay, so like bushes.
Right, because we're not putting the bush back there. If we take it out, we're not putting the bush back there. We will replace turf, but
you're
that's as
talking-
far as we're
Are
going.
you talking about the same thing, just to be clear? You're talking about what needs a special privilege in public right of way. Are you also saying, I think you're asking, if I'm just a homeowner and I want to put something in, usually in the permitting process, you would find, you're in the public right of way. But there's things that you do as a homeowner that don't need any communication with the village, and then that's the part where you just don't know that it's in the right of way.
So like a retaining wall would probably need a permit, correct?
Right.
If you're constructing one?
Anything in the right of way that's not turf would require a special privilege permit.
But say you
But
don't
just say
think
you
you're
don't
in the
know you're in
right
the
of way.
right of way.
Just assume that you're ignorant of this whole right of way thing. And it's like, well, I want to build a retaining wall. Would I think to go to the village and get a permit for that, or do I think I can just do that on my own?
Many people think they can do that on their own, correct? If it's not a certain height, they don't need a permit for it.
Right, okay,
Yep.
that right there is
So that's the distinction, so there are
As
things
long as
that,
on
if
their
you're over
property,
6
right.
feet tall, so like, I think, let me see if I'm right. I think Commissioner Patel and Commissioner Hanson are saying, what are the things major things that might be in the public right of way that require a permit? Because then you would find out by going through that permitting process,
assuming you don't know it's in the right of way.
right, so if you're gonna install a 6-foot retaining wall and that requires a permit,
Yeah.
and so you go to get your permit.
I see what we're saying,
Right,
yes.
but if you were gonna install some bushes, you
Correct.
don't,
You
you
wouldn't
don't
think
get a
to
permit,
come
then
in.
you're not gonna catch it as fast,
Right,
so.
and even like a fence, 4-foot fence versus a 6-foot fence, and you might get a
Right.
permit for a 6-foot, but not a 4-foot, so I'll just put it in 4-foot.
And that's the ones that I think you're saying are the hardest to
I get it now,
triple
yeah.
feet.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's
I-
a little bit unfair, because I don't, I think that people should have fair warning about things, and I don't think it's clear at all.
I think too, to
It's
Bart's
kind of-
point on the sizes and what you're saying, some examples, I mean, pretty sure my little historical markers,
In the right of way.
that, I don't have a permit for that.
Those all receive permits.
They all do.
I did!
Yep.
Alright.
Those have a running list of,
Yep, we did it for you,
Look at
babe.
Now I don't have to rip it out with a
I've been
hammer.
really worried about that one, so.
And I was
This whole
thinking
time,
about
I
it.
haven't even been talking about this. Those were given permits, correct?
Okay, but I mean, you get what I'm saying,
Yes.
it's like things like that, do we care if someone, I also have my neighbor kept driving over the
Oh,
grass, I
sure.
put a stone there. I mean, again, some of these things.
If it has sharp edges, and someone's gonna, you never know. I know what you're saying.
Why'd you tell them that?
I'm coming clean now, because then I can say later, like, I talked to you about this.
So that's one request for staff. If anybody else has other requests for their next meeting, I have one, and I just want to hear from the attorney. We have this all over the village, and right here is one example. We were talking about special event permits last meeting, and all of a sudden, I'm like, no, we just talked about a fee, which is in the fee schedule, about permitting in parks. I swear there is an ordinance that requires permits for parks, and yet they spent 7 meetings talking about the special event policy without knowing there's other things at committee that affect it. And so what I'm saying is, we have a lot of, and as Bart has said, spread out things. We have like an ordinance, and then you don't know that you now have to go to the policy book online, and then you might have to go to the program book, and there might be, and they call it permitting. It's very, very, when we open something up, I'd like to make it as efficient as possible for staff, for cost reasons and aggravation, and for the public. I mean, streamlining things is the number one thing we can do, not money, streamlining process. So here we have a policy and an ordinance. Those seem like they can be combined, in my opinion. But then you've also got individual policies on different programs. So is there a distinction between, as we're working on this, between what needs to stay separate and why?
You mean in terms of who can grant privileges or grant permits versus who
I
can't?
mean, what is an ordinance? Like,
Are you referring to like the parklet program
Right.
and outdoor seating policy?
like outdoor seating?
Those
for
aren't
example.
referenced within the
In
ordinance.
Milwaukee, it's in the ordinance.
Right.
Why do
So-
we have a policy?
In our instance, we don't have those programs or policies stipulated in our ordinance, but we administer them through policies. And whether or not they could be incorporated into the ordinance, I
Yes.
think is maybe the question. I have no issues with incorporating them within.
Me either.
I mean, as long as the policy is, enumerates items that are well within the discretion of the agency or the municipal body that's issuing the permit or the privilege, sometimes it's just easier to adapt the policy to changing realities related to everything from technology to the construction of the street to whatever it might be. But, I mean, it doesn't really, you could enumerate those in an ordinance or a policy. But it's like, for example, some of them, like privileges in streets, it says that generally that the village board is the entity that can grant a privilege under the statute, but then there's exceptions to that. Like, for example, it says that with respect to telecommunications carriers and others doing work in the street, the board doesn't have to weigh in on that. That can just be
But what
issued by the
prohibits that
local.
information from being in an ordinance rather than a policy? I mean, even if you kept all the information the same.
Well, I think the special privilege, though, I think the reason that's an ordinance, though, is under the state statute. There's certain privileges within the streets that are non-buildable, which you can't just say, well,
Do I
you
get
just
that?
can't give it to the planning commissioner and say, you make the decision for us. There are certain items that I think you can't delegate, but there's specific things under the statute that you can. For example, there's a date. It says this section doesn't apply to obstruction or excavation in place for less than 90 days. So,
So listen to my question closely. I get that, but our ordinance contains some things that are delegated, and then we have a policy that contains some things that have been. Why couldn't you have the same exact? I mean, we may choose as a commission to recommend something different, like maybe it should be administrative. But before any of that changes, is there anything that prohibits, if we do have an ordinance on special privileges or any other topic, and there's policies related to it, can we put them all into the ordinance?
oh, sure, we could do that, yeah.
So you're just saying the opposite. You couldn't there are certain things you need in your ordinance because they can't be delegated
Right.
into a policy.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think it's just the flip. There's one thing that's an exception in my mind, which learning from being on this board was pilot programs. So when the parklet program was a pilot, or we had a bike corral pilot program, that makes sense not to change, to me, an ordinance, because that ordinance is law. But if you adopt the program, I'm assuming, is there anything that maybe past boards or something felt, we're not sure we adopted it, but we're not sure, so we want to change our ordinances? Maybe that's a reason?
I guess that's more of a policy.
It's never came up with you.
I mean, I think the short answer is probably it's easier to amend the policy and adapt the policy to changing physical conditions in the environment and how technology might affect.
But how so?
One
Like,
way or the
is it
other.
less of a vote at the village board?
Yeah, I mean, it's, because you're not passing a formal ordinance where you're monkeying with your code. The thought process probably was that it's just a little easier to adopt things on the fly with respect to the policy.
Is it
Again,
because it's
I
less of
think
a
that's-
vote? I think for an ordinance, I think to change an ordinance, it requires a certain amount of votes, like a 3/4 vote, correct? It's roll call, and maybe to change a policy, there's less?
Or there could be things within a policy that wouldn't even need board approval. I mean, if the board has granted the authority to one of the departments to grant or deny a permit within certain parameters that are identified in the ordinance, as long as you're within those parameters, you know, the internal policy itself may fluctuate. But
But it could be the ordinance, I just.
Yeah, I'm happy to consolidate them into one location just for ease of administration. You know, when I arrived here, I think the first thing I looked at was the park program or policy, whatever it was at the time. And I will say I was a little bit confused that it wasn't in the ordinance and it was in this location and where else should I be looking kind of things. So I have no issues with getting them all into one location as feasible. If they're better off as a policy or as a pilot program, I can understand that rather than, because ordinance amendments are costly. I mean, we have to print out books and, you know, I think it's like $500 or something every time we do an
We
ordinance.
still print books?
Well, I mean, all these code books or what sort of, I don't keep one current in my office because I reference the code, but to that point, once again, the online version only gets updated once every like 6 months, and so if it gets passed in September and you're looking at that, and this ordinance is sitting out there, so I think updating the ordinance is more process prohibitive, but if we're not gonna change it, I would just put it in the ordinance. So, with that direction, I'm fine trying to consolidate as much as I can into one location, in a revised draft that I can bring back for
That's
discussion.
my opinion, but Commissioner Dan?
Oh, no, that was a new stretch, I'm sorry.
Oh, anybody else have an opinion on that?
That's what I would think.
Okay, we'll take your guidance on that one.
Yeah, I'd be happy to put something together. I don't know how quickly I can do that, but in a future meeting, I will bring back a draft for discussion.
Okay, and maybe just a list, I apologize, it's a lot of work, but a list of, I know you put them all in here, but if, just a list of all policies and just on one piece of paper that touch special privileges currently, and maybe like, and who administers them, like, so we know if it's delegated or not. Just a chart would be really helpful.
if you look under the existing code under 466, there's a couple of, the earlier part of the ordinance just talks about construction-related permits that are issued directly by the planning commission that don't even come through. So there's some of those built right into 466.
Does 466 reference parklets and outdoor seating and?
No.
That's where I get confused. Okay. Anything else from commissioners? Anything else you want to see from staff or Drew? All right, do you have anything for us, Kurt?
No, I was gonna say, if something comes up, feel free to email me or call me or stop in. I'm always happy to incorporate whatever I can throughout the process. I don't anticipate this coming back in December, I'll be honest with you, in terms of my current workload, so I expect it early next year sometime.
Yep. The only thing that I question is the triple fees, and I know you had mentioned earlier implementing them tomorrow because the permit. Is there anything from the commissioners that we want to recommend that be held off until we decide on minor major or residential commercial? That's what I've heard, but I don't want to misinterpret.
That's what I would agree. I think we should hold off. I think it feels very punitive.
I would be fine with that direction. We only get them on complaint basis anyway, so I'm hoping that.
Let's like
I
have
mean, more of them
an
popping in.
amnesty period while we work on it for recommendation to the board.
Yeah, because like I said, a lot of these arose from sidewalk, that should all be done by now. We had one miscellaneous complaint that came in. I'm hoping for a little while we have less applications processed.
Yeah, there's a lot coming to the board, so, okay. Thank you.
So for now, we will not require triple, but we will require an actual permit fee.
Yeah, and just for the record, I would just say until we're, you know, almost complete with our recommendation for the board, so then you can inform the board of whether it's recommended to do that or not.
Yes.
Okay. All right, with that, there's no other further discussion for today, and you mentioned when will we talk about it next?
I'm gonna suggest early next year.
January?
We can try for January. We can try for January.
Or February?
Um,
Because I know we have our comp plan coming up, correct?
Correct. And the housing study and transportation studies are both wrapping up, so am busy with those at the moment, so drafting an ordinance over that holiday period might not be feasible.
Oh, okay, fine, great. And I just, and I hope the commissioners, I'm very grateful. Planning Commission has always requested in the past, and when I got here, that we work on some substantive things like ordinance changes and policy changes, and rather than just seeing conditional uses. And I wholeheartedly, as a chair, value streamlining things for our staff and us and our residents and business owners. So hopefully, if you have any objection, if they're going to be a little longer discussions, but just know that that's the intent, is to move forward with some policy and ordinance updates. Okay, all right. Then we will move on to the next item. Here we go. Number 8, discussion of CDA Village Board strategic goals and priorities survey on economic development and housing. Bart.
Thank you, President Rosick. So within the packet on page 32, there's an introductory memo of the general initiative that the CDA and Village Board jointly put together and was selected for moving forward. So they are hoping to, or planning to convene in February of next year. With that session, they would like to have the information on the housing study completed. As a first step in getting additional public input via the committees and commissions that the board has appointed, they've asked that the Plan Commission and other committees and commissions as well think about the questions on this in the survey that's included in the packet and submit one response by consensus.
But if we can't get to that point, individual responses are okay, according to people.
Correct. So if for some reason your opinions don't come through and you really think that you were left out of the process, they're not here to say that they don't want to hear them. But their goal in order to streamline their process would be
Done.
Right, the Planning Commission's 3 top priorities are this, and then we received 2 extra ones that didn't make that. So they don't want to have to wade through, 100 responses individually. So they're hoping that committees and commissions can, put their heads together and come up with those kind of ideas. But once again, if it's not in the final selection, you feel strongly about it, they will take in individual responses. So I included the survey. We talked about it just before the meeting started, I guess. The survey needs to be submitted by the chair of the committee by January 15, 2020. So with that, our December meeting will primarily be to fill out and, get consensus on some of these things. So if over the next month you can, fill this out yourself so that you can bring it back to next.
Can they send it in?
They can submit it to me, for example, if you're not going to be here, in December, or if you want to submit it earlier, then you would submit it to the staff liaison, not to Baker Tilly.
Not, or to the chair?
Well, they can give it to the chair.
Okay, you can just share it, but the only reason I ask that is it'll make the meeting go quicker if there's a lot of consensus on a question, then we don't need to go around and, we can acknowledge that. If there's not, and then we can talk about that, and then we can rank at the end. It just makes it go quicker. It doesn't mean that you'd be left out if you forgot to send it in, but it would just be.
I think that's a perfectly acceptable way to move forward.
Commissioner Patel?
I was just kind of skimming through the survey, and the one question I don't understand to answer is how are they defining economic development? I mean, it seems like you could
It's
define
commercial, correct?
Are we just talking commercial? Whether defining?
So,
And apartments are commercial, I think.
It was intended to be left open so that the commission could define what you guys think economic development is. So if you think economic development is building the tax base, and the Conservation Committee thinks economic development is, attracting jobs, those are kind of what they're weeding out. And so I don't want to also, and I just gave 2 examples, which I shouldn't have, but.
Actually. So economic development is defined. I mean, if you look at the city market, they have 2 departments for economic development. One is to build tax base, which is development, and the other is, real estate development, and then the other is job creation. Those are the 2 ways most municipalities define economic development. But the question of real estate is, does that mean any real estate? Is it, because we're talking about housing, which is a real estate thing, and then economic development, are they really separate? That would be my question, my assumption.
Yeah, so over the next weeks, days, month, I guess they would like for you guys to individually research what you think that is. I think those are the 2 obvious answers, but if for some reason we come up with a different one that we want to submit, if it's.
So how I would interpret it is, you can talk about job creation, which we don't have a lot of jobs here besides, just so everyone knows, our biggest employers here are Metro Market and the school system, and then the government. So those are our three job creators for the Shorewood Benjamin community. So job creation is a great topic. Do we need to attract more daytime population through bringing in employees? That's always been a question when I was on CDA. And then I would consider the real estate development for economic development, mixed-use properties that have like apartments, and that's what I consider as economic development, where you have some commercial in there. Housing does build the tax base, but since they're asking separate questions about strictly housing, I don't know that, I just don't know that you could not focus on that if you needed to, because you have other questions that would touch on it. So that's typically how I would look at it.
And I think from the plan commission's perspective, with the plan commission, hat on, I think they're probably looking for zoning implications on both of those kind of topics. We're not strong to just submitting zoning things. Obviously, if there's other, whether it's some sort of incentive program or something that you think would benefit, but I think they're looking for the committees to provide feedback on what it is that they particularly oversee or look at. So
What do we oversee, the land use map?
land use, so density, conditional use permits obviously here, right? Like
Use.
Right, if we wanted to open up more uses in the village, or if we wanted to restrict more uses in certain areas.
Everything that has to do with
Right.
land use. is pretty much-
My intention was to not give away any answers tonight.
Oh, sorry.
I'm failing on
I just
that.
wanted to say, well, no, I mean, if you don't have
It
a
helps
planning
clarify.
background or an architect
Right.
background, it's very difficult to know.
I think it is helpful if you reference the last, or the current, I should say, Central District Master Plan. They have like 14 goals in there. I think all of those kind of are economic development related goals. And I think confirming whether or not you still believe those are accurate or relevant is a good start to, kind of gauge the temperature of what you'd like to submit.
Or if there's one that you think we should be focusing on.
Right.
Is this the only format that this questionnaire is in? I mean, if we wanted to fill it out on our computer, is there a Word version or something that we could access, or a
Wait,
fillable
I thought
PDF?
so.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, this probably did come in Word version, so I guess I'll up the committee Word version. I probably just made it in a PDF and I put it on here. I'm sure I can get a Word version of
Will you
this.
send that to the commissioners
Yes.
just in case? And just before the January 15th meeting, if you can, or if you have any questions, ask staff, but you could also submit it back so that we can at least do some.
Yeah, if you're willing to submit it to either myself or President Rosick, I could compile them for discussion in December. And, we could say, oh, we've got 6 of the same thing here. It seems like that's something that we want to submit. That's helpful. If you don't want to, I can't make you do that, I suppose. Just come to the conversation, but that would help
It's
guide.
usually me. I
Right,
always
that-
forget to submit. It's like,
That would help guide the discussion, because I'm definitely going to go through, question by question, and I don't want to be here for 4 hours if we can streamline that in a half hour. Sorry.
Can you,
I'll send that out.
go,
That's it. I'll send the Word version out, and if you want to send it back to me, just do it before the next packet's compiled.
is there an update on the references the housing study? I think you referenced it. Is there?
So, when we were talking to Baker Tilly, our new financial
Advisors.
consultant, our advisors. So this is new, it used to be
Ellers.
Ellers for years. So this is our first time with Baker Tilly. And there was a small group of us, including Peter Hammond and myself, another board member that's on the CDA anyways, and the village manager, you, and somebody else. Anyways, so when we were interviewing, they really came out strong with strategic planning and other things that are related to financing. They just, community and economic development was very strong with them. And they seem to like to plan rather than, do it on the backside. So they were chosen, the board adopted unanimously to have them. My concern was they wanted to do a strategic planning of just the CDA, which made perfect sense because they need to set their goals for the following years. And it's been a while, it's been 7-8 years, we've had a lot of change in the village. And so it was a good timing just to look at our volunteer committees, which we have hundreds of volunteers, that's not a big effort, strategic planning, not comprehensive planning. And just to find out from our volunteers, are we on the same direction with our comp plan? And so, so we have some action items. And then my concern was we have a housing market study going on, and you might ask, what kind of housing do you want, or what kind of commercial development do you want? And we say hardware store, and meanwhile, we have no market for it. Like so the two can't be separated. It's really hard to say to people, we've done it in the past with focus groups, to say, well, what do you want to see? And we just still don't have those things, because potentially maybe we don't have the market. And that's why I really push CDA to go into the housing market study and commercial. I don't know if they're looking at commercial, I think it's just housing,
It's
correct?
just housing,
Which I
correct.
had a problem with, but that's what they chose to do.
When's it going to be done?
Soon,
So the town halls,
Similar timing.
which I did send out invitations to, were last Thursday. The presentation of findings is going to be the 19th of December, if that is a Thursday.
and that's
yeah,
not
so-
just a summary of the focus groups, or it's also part of the market analysis.
So they're going to be presenting the data,
Okay.
qualitative and quantitative, that they found to that point, to the CDA. It's going to be an open public meeting though, so they're presenting their findings to that meeting, and then in January, I don't think we have a date picked. If we do, I don't remember it offhand. I think it's the week of the 13th. They're going to present their recommendations based on further analysis of the findings. So it is a month to month to month, and then in February 7th is when they expect to present the final version to the CDA.
And my hope is, when we talked about the purpose of it, is we have a large percent of seniors coming up in the next 10 years that are living in our community, over 30%. So do we need senior housing? That's one thing I know they'll be looking at, the statistics and the data. Affordable housing, people always talk about that affordability. Our community survey that was ranked #1 issue by the residents is affordability of housing. So they were tasked to look at affordability in our community. And if you're just talking about housing, I think those were the two biggest issues. And then also we have a program we have on hold, just so everyone knows, the revolving loan fund that was attic conversions and there used to be down payment assistance.
And duplex
And
conversions.
duplex conversions. And so waiting to see, is there, you know, only have half that money left. It'll come back eventually, but it's like it used to be 20 years that they have to pay off. So we have like 200,000 left, and is that the right focus? Like, do we still need to have bigger single-family homes for students or whatever the purpose was back then? So those are some of the things they're looking at, you know, to give some data and,
Sure.
but other than that, I don't remember anything talked about. You're way more from me.
Yeah, they'll be looking at the zoning code as well to see whether or not there's anything in there that could be modified. So at the town hall, some concepts came up for supportive housing in terms of non-traditional family definitions, right? So if adults, independent adults who aren't fully capable of living by themselves, if a co-housing option will be available, because our zoning code allow that. They discussed accessory dwelling units. I think that's relevant to the planning commission. You know, is that something that could help affordability issues with either additional rental income and or you moving back there and allowing someone else to live in the house? They're expensive to build, so I don't know if that's going to be a recommendation or not, but
Do they look at condos, like actual home ownership rather than just private?
they talk about ownership versus rental. Instead of a duplex conversion, they talk about twin dominiums, a concept that came up of, you know, making a duplex into 2 owner-occupied units. If owner occupancy is still a goal, is that a better way to keep the number of units but encourage owner occupancy? So all those kind of concepts are on the table right now. There is a survey. I will be sending a survey out later this week is my hope. I can send out committees and commissions as well. There's a housing survey for anyone that lives in the village or anyone that works in the village, so the school district, people like that, that maybe want to live here but can't find options. They're curious who those people are. So the survey is open through the 27th, which is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving of November.
First I heard it.
Yep, no, it was noted, and I think it's on the website currently. Like I said, I'll be promoting it out in emails before end of this week is my goal. So that is available. That's part of the data findings that they'll summarize in December. So not to get too off topic, but yeah, we're talking about this one here, but that one's going on as well, so.
Did that answer?
Yep.
We don't have anything yet.
Good question. Thanks, Bill.
All right. Did you have anything else? Chris?
Nope, I'll send the Word version out and give you a deadline to give me responses back if you'd like me to compile them for next discussion.
Fabulous. Okay, any other questions on that from commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to the next agenda item, which is schedule the next meeting.
So with the holiday timelines, December 17th would be the next plan commission meeting.
Isn't that right, is that right before, oh no, the house, what's the 19th of December?
The 19th is when the CDA is meeting to discuss the findings of the housing
Okay.
study. The regular plan commission meeting would be the 17th of December. Unless that doesn't work, we have to find a special time. I don't know, people's schedules get busy at the end of the month, so if that doesn't work, let us know as soon as possible.
Do you
As of
wanna
now,
move
we
it up
have,
a week? I just, so typically, it doesn't work because people are going on vacation, so if they're going on like a 7-day vacation for the holidays, does
Yeah.
anyone have a problem with that?
as of now, we have no applications in, so there's no public hearings to schedule via, notices, so we could move it. That's just a,
Does anyone want to move it up a week?
I'm
That's my
fine.
question.
I'm fine with 17.
I'll be in Chicago that week, but.
So 17th is okay? I'm okay, let's do the 17th then.
Tomorrow,
I'm okay.
okay.
Commissioner Day.
I rarely get a name tag anyway, so.
Commissioner Dan, any comment from you over there?
No, good. We're off topic, so there's none of that.
Any December gifts we should know about?
Well, this was the December gift. I didn't know if we were having one, but then Bart told
Did
me
you get
we
a-
are. So.
Get them canned right away.
To give us back.
This is a Thanksgiving gift now, see? Is that a how? Can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
We're
see.
here yet. Dan's got his mood over there.
No, I've got one for Alice. It's right here. It's coming out of a holiday bag.
It's allowed right now.
Okay, so we're doing 17.
Yep.
All right, thank you. All right, so then we'll go to future agenda items. Any future agenda item? I would like to put on there for a future agenda, conditional use permits.
Yep.
And just to look at ones that you believe may be administratively approved in other areas and ones that we see and approve all the time.
Can I ask a question, since I don't know? Well, never mind. Pass.
Go ahead, Commissioner Dan.
I've heard this come up in the community, the issue of Spectre Field and the people who use the soccer field vacating, maybe building another field. I know this has been rotated. Where does that go through within the village, something like that?
I think the Parks Commission might have been doing that. I don't know if it was tonight, but there was a large group in there that's not typical for a Parks Commission.
I haven't heard anything.
I would assume the Parks Commission, but I can get back, I can talk to Becky or Tyler and see where that is on agendas and let you know for
And
sure.
who would have to ultimately approve it? Is that what you're asking too?
Yeah, because the talk, there's going around how it's been used a lot more, and there's apparently money there to do another field, but the village has to decide. I was just wondering where that is.
Oh, yeah, could you just update the commission?
Yep.
At some point. Great. Anything else? Okay, seeing no more future agenda items for Core Park, we will move on to a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kudo, second by Commissioner Dan. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thanks, guys.